Darren, I want to make sure, because our levels are different, and I'm doing it through Streamlabs right now, which is a little bit different.
Yeah.
So I'm going to count to 10. Then I'm going to have you count to 10.
Okay.
I'm going to have Adam count to 10.
Yeah.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
And Adam.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Schlemiel, Schlemassel, Haas and Pfeffer Incorporated.
We're gonna do it. Give us any chance, we'll take it. Read us any rule, we'll break it.
Oh, you idiot with your stupid face! You look like Gene Simmons had sex with a basset hound!
Welcome to Irritable Dad Syndrome. Will you please pass the gravy? Here are your hosts, Mike and Darren.
Hey, I'm Darren.
I'm Mike.
Welcome to Irritable Dad Syndrome. This is episode 117. This is going to be a very special episode. I'm very excited.
Tonight.
And I'll tell you about that here in a second. Before we start, we have a very special guest on our show that we've teased. But before we get into that, I want to congratulate my two kids, Jacob and Cameron, who are in the Lakota West Marching Band. Over the weekend, they went to Indianapolis and competed in the Grand Nationals Marching Band competition. Out of 100 bands, their band, Lakota West, ranked in the top 30.
Out of 100.
Out of 100 bands. Yeah. It wasn't from lack of trying. They performed their faces off. It was insane how great they were. And I told them, I said, guys, hold your head up high because you can say with pride that you did better than you've ever done before, and they were amazing. So congratulations to the band.
So in band, do they pour a Gatorade thing over the conductor guy?
No, they do not.
Okay. That's a shame.
So we have a guest tonight. He has come back to the show. And Adam Nedeff, he's a game show historian and an author. He has a new book coming out. And I asked him, it's like, do you want to come back? And he's like, well, yeah, heck yeah. So Adam, welcome back to the show.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much for having me.
Oh, absolutely. Have you had a surge in book sales since your last appearance?
Quite a bit, yeah. A lot of interest from all around. I think the combination of you guys and Betty White's estate have done me a world of good.
Fantastic.
But yeah, it's been an interesting year for me.
Good.
Yeah.
Well, you know what? We wrapped the episode with you the last time, and as soon as you were gone, I realized that I forgot to ask you a couple of things, and I was pissed off because it's like I didn't know for sure if you were going to be coming back. But one of our listeners, a friend of mine, had asked, do you think that the theme from the match game and Mysterious Ways by U2 are the same song?
Here we go. I didn't start this, by the way. I did not start this one.
They sound so alike.
All right.
Are you talking about the original 60s theme, Swingin' Safari, or are you talking about the... I never really gave that any thought before.
Okay.
But now...
So, for those of us just now joining us on the video stream, Adam Nedeff is not 10 feet tall. No. And he did not just smack his cameraman who's lying on the ground, aiming the phone up at him. This is a trick of the This is a George.
No,
Lucas
this is making the best of a bad situation. It's I agreed to do this podcast, and then immediately every piece of technology in my apartment melted. So the best way to do this would have been on a laptop, and it's at Best Buy right now, where the work was going to be done 4 days ago. Okay. So I'm very cautious. I'm cautiously optimistic that'll be done within the next 8 days.
Because we had Chris Hughes standing by looking for hints that you may be, kidnapped, or you may start using Morse code with your blinks, asking for help. I don't see duct tape. Yeah. I think you're good.
We appreciate you working through all the technical difficulties.
Sure thing. Well, I appreciate you helping me out with getting this set up.
Yeah. The other thing I wanted to mention last time was involved with the match game. Was the match game Hollywood Squares Hour, was that the worst hour of game show? Honest to God, Mike, I don't know if you remember this. It's like everybody remembers the match game, but there was a brief period in time, and I can't remember how long it lasted, but Gene Rayburn, 9 months, and Bowser from Sha-Na-Na.
Wait, Bowser?
Bowser.
The only Bowser I know is Super Mario Brothers Bowser.
No. This was this one was before Super Mario Brothers.
Really?
They had an hour. The first half was Match Game. Second half was Hollywood Squares, and it was horrible.
Yeah. No, let me give you the whole story there, just to be as concise as, but it's not going to be concise at all. I can already sense this is going to turn into Adam rambling.
We need we have no content, so please take as long as you.
No, NBC had an opening in their schedule. It was 3 p.m. to 4 p.m. They wanted to get a soap opera going called Santa Barbara, but Santa Barbara wasn't going to be ready for a year and a half because they wanted to be a little more high tech than most soap operas were in the early 1980s, and they wanted everything to be ready. So they needed to fill in this blank spot on their daytime schedule until Santa Barbara was ready. And they needed it to be a single hour-long show. And so they settled on game show because game shows are very cost effective and very, very cheap, generally speaking. And they decided it had to be a 1 hour show. And they decided initially it was going to be a 1 hour version of the Match Game. Gene Rayburn was going to host a full hour version of that show.
Mm-hmm.
But then the NBC executives got to talking and they thought, well, I don't know that Match Game is strong enough to sustain a full hour on its own. So what if we did Match Game and another game show and combined them into a single game show? And so they made this deal to lease the rights to Hollywood Squares to Mark Goodson and his company. So they made it the Match Game Hollywood Squares Hour. Now,
was
here's
Gilbert
the big problem with
Gottfried?
this.
So Hollywood Square was Gilbert Gottfried in this.
Gilbert Gottfried was. I don't think he was alive
You
yet.
fool!
Yeah,
Gilbert, way
yeah.
back. Okay, all right.
No,
No,
Gilbert
the
was,
John Davidson years of Hollywood Squares were amazing.
Okay.
In my opinion.
Yeah.
Okay.
Not as good as the
this was
Peter
before
Marshall.
John Davidson.
Yeah.
This was between Peter Marshall and John Davidson, and Gilbert was not involved because he was slumming it on the Alan Thicke show at that point. But and eventually got fired from that. Gilbert once gave the definitive quote. He said he got fired from the Alan Thicke show, and if you need a dictionary definition of rock bottom, it's being fired from the Alan Thicke show. Gilbert, I'm sorry, it's just not working out.
No, he was, wasn't he? He was fired from SNL too, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, he was part of the legendary For All the Wrong Reasons 1980-81 season.
With Robert Downey Jr. Yeah, okay.
Yeah. And so anyway, they decided to do the Match Game Hollywood Squares Hour with none of the people who worked behind the scenes on Hollywood Squares. It was going to be all Goodson's people who had nothing to do with the Peter Marshall version of the show. Peter Marshall had a falling out with some of the executives at NBC, so Peter Marshall wasn't going to be involved. And the big, big problem with doing Hollywood Squares under Mark Goodson's watch was Mark Goodson, like a decade earlier, had given a newspaper interview where he made it known that he hated Hollywood Squares. And the reason he hated Hollywood Squares was because the stars were briefed in advance and given the jokes that they made after they were asked the questions. And Mark Goodson referred to that as actionable fraud because you're reading the game. Well, no, you're not, because you're not giving the stars the correct answers. And also, it's up to the contestants to decide if they should agree or disagree with it. So it fundamentally doesn't answer what the stars say. But Mark Goodson had said this, and so that meant if they were going to do the Hollywood Squares under Mark Goodson's watch, it couldn't have jokes, and the celebrities couldn't be given any kind of advance brief.
What's the point?
Right.
I mean,
so they go on the air and they do this dull as dishwasher. The first half hour with Match Game was fine, but then the idea was the winner of Match Game would go on to play the returning champion from the previous day in Hollywood Squares. And Hollywood Squares always just laid there and died because they tried to make up for the loss of the joke answers by banter, Match Game style banter, which meant you had like 8 or 9 questions in a half hour of Hollywood Squares. And none of it was funny because nobody had been given funny material to work with. So you just had half an hour of nothing. And then they gave dead space.
They gave John Bauman from Sha-Na-Na the keys to the car.
So hold on.
Yeah.
Who
remembered who he was?
Okay, I'm the idiot of the crew here.
Okay,
because
yes.
I don't know much about the game show thing.
Okay,
but I'm imagining Gilbert Gottfried and Nipsey Russell.
Right.
Okay, that's who I'm imagining.
right.
In the squares. Who's in the squares during this time period?
Oh, they were.
Lurch?
It was a grab bag. And one of the other things that I learned this from talking to one of the staffers on the show, Match Game Hollywood Squares Hour had the worst luck with people dropping out the day of or the day before tapings.
Like Uncle Jesse from Dukes of Hazzard?
They would have been lucky to get Denver Pyle. Denver Pyle would have been a blessing. You could have given him the center square.
Yeah.
And he would
Cooter?
have
Was Cooter be in there?
There were a few theme weeks. They did a theme week where it was the whole cast of Too Close for Comfort. They did a week with the cast of St. Elsewhere, which was crazy because it had to be the only game show appearance ever for Norman Lloyd. And up until a year ago, when Norman Lloyd passed away, everybody on the panel was still alive. So that was kind of bonkers to look at when you watch the reruns.
Well, I was searching through on the Roku box. There's a channel, and it gives you like 88 or 89 of all day long channels, and one of them was game shows. It wasn't Game Show Network, but it was game shows. And I'm searching through there, and the Match Game Hollywood Squares Hour, and one of their special guests was Bull from Night Court, who came out shirtless. But he was wearing a tie.
Is it Richard Moll?
Richard Moll.
Yep.
Richard Moll.
There you go.
Yeah, Richard Moll did a lot. Different Strokes. Adelaide, the second maid, did the show a lot. Needra Voles.
Adelaide, the second maid. That's a spinoff right there.
I mean, no flipping clue who. And it was horrible. It was
the supporting cast of Mr. Smith. Do you remember Mr. Smith?
No.
Mr. Smith was part of the NBC in 1983 released the worst fall schedule in the history of network television. They released
that was the gorilla, right? The monkey.
Yes, it was the show about the talking monkey who lived in Washington, D.C.
Yes.
That was Mr. Smith. It was one of 11 new shows that NBC introduced that fall, and none of them made it to 1984.
Was it the same monkey that rode around with Clint Eastwood in that movie?
No, that was Clyde.
Which Way But Loose?
That was Clyde in Every Which Way But Loose.
Yeah.
Right turn, Clyde.
No, it was the other monkey in show business at that point.
I can't remember what you said in your book, but you were talking about the chemistry or lack thereof between Gene Rayburn and John Bowman, and it was Oil and Water doesn't even describe it.
Yeah, they just did not mesh at all. And Gene Rayburn said years later, I really tried. I tried to find some sort of common ground there, but it wasn't clicking. And the other issue was John Bowser, from what I've been told, I've never had a chance to speak with him, and I was told by a friend whose advice I trusted not to interview him for that book.
Okay.
And I've heard from all accounts that John is a lovely man, but the problem with John was John had been an actor up to that point. The general public knew him as Bowser. He was always that character. Mm-hmm. And then all of a sudden, he's John Bowman, the host of Hollywood Squares. Who the hell is? Even if you were a fan of Shaun and I, you might have looked at him once and, what? Who's John Bowman?
Right.
So you took this beloved game show that had a 14-year run with Peter Marshall, and now all of a sudden there's this absolute stranger in everyone's eyes hosting Hollywood Squares.
And a shirtless Richard Moll.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
just a very odd vibe.
It's so sad, and I'm so happy that John Davidson and that gang with Shadow Stevens brought it back and then gave it some life again. So but that's
John Davidson's still at it and still going. He's still singing, and for a fundraiser last year, he did a version of the show called Hollywood Museum Squares. To raise some money, and hadn't missed a step.
Yeah, good.
It was a lot of fun to watch. Yeah.
Good for him.
This portion of our show is brought to you by Diff Liquid Concentrated Wallpaper Stripper. With its unique enzyme action, Diff dissolves old paste and cuts wallpaper removal time in half. Hi, I'm Dave Lay, and every year around the holidays, my Uncle Bob would come to visit. After a big dinner, we would always break out some Diff and strip wallpaper at my grandmother's house. Well, it became a holiday tradition. I sure do miss him. Make the holiday special at your home with Diff, the only one that really works. Now back to the show.
Our guest is Adam Nedeff, and he has a brand new book that just came out. The day we're recording, this is going to come out on the Tuesday before Thanksgiving, which is perfect because everybody knows the day after Thanksgiving, Black Friday.
It literally just came out to the point that I don't have a copy in my hands, so I'm going to pantomime holding up a book, and in post, what you can do is just edit in the cover of that book. Yeah.
And we're completely inept, so we'll put in a picture of a melon or something.
But Mike, this book is about one of the greatest game show hosts of all time, Mr. Monty Hall.
Monty Hall.
Yeah. Adam, how did you get involved with this?
It's actually kind of an interesting story, and a bittersweet story. A very good friend of mine named Bob Bowden, who was my boss a few years ago. I was working on a show called Funny You Should Ask, which Bob would probably appreciate if I mentioned. It is still seen weekdays in syndication. Check your local listings.
Okay.
But I was working on that show, and Bob had formed a very close relationship with Monty Hall and his family. Bob was an executive at Game Show Network at the time that they secured the deal to get the rights to the Let's Make a Deal rerun package, and he was the executive who oversaw that. And so he formed a very good relationship with Monty Hall, and they got to be very close toward the end of his life. And at the time Monty passed away, Bob asked me if I'd like to come to the funeral. And I had no relationship at all with Monty Hall or his family, but it was Monty Hall, and here I am, a game show fan and somebody who's been able to form a career in game shows. So, yeah, I'll go down there and pay my final respects. So I went down there.
You went to Monty Hall's funeral.
I attended Monty Hall's funeral.
Okay.
And it was kind of a surreal experience. I remember I made it a point to sit in the back row because I'm like, I didn't know the guy, and I don't want to feel like I'm horning in on this. So I made it a point to sit in the back row. And then I remember at the end of the funeral, everybody sitting in the back row except me gets up and walks out of their seats. And I was like, oh, is this some sort of ritual that I don't know about? And I realized that they're going over to a bunch of the other guests to tend to them. I was the only person in the back row who wasn't there as a hired caretaker.
Okay.
So, yeah.
That's a little awkward.
Monty's friends have all lived very long lives, it turns out. It was a lovely funeral. It was a lovely service. And then at the end of the service, and this is something I didn't know about Jewish tradition because I was raised Catholic and I was nowhere near Jewish tradition, but I found out it's a tradition to leave the mound of dirt and leave a shovel out and just have the guests bury the body. So I was asked, do you want to bury Monty Hall? And I nodded my head, and it ended up being really kind of a powerful experience because you go from being a little kid sitting on the floor and watching this guy in a plaid suit hand out money to people in Halloween costumes.
Now you're chucking dirt on him.
To writing books and making
a
career of the thing that you always loved when you were a kid, and now you're burying him. So that was kind of a startling experience. And then the next step that happened was Bob floated the idea of me writing a book about Monty Hall. Monty had written a memoir in 1973. He had written an autobiography. There's a difference between an autobiography and a memoir. He wrote an autobiography.
I'm going to ask you the difference, but not right now. Yeah.
We'll come back to that. Yeah.
Okay.
You folks at home, we can actually make a game out of this. What is the difference between an autobiography and a memoir? The answer is coming later in the podcast. Now,
good.
Some may pronounce it memoir.
Yeah, some people don't. Yeah.
And autobiography.
And so Bob had floated the idea, and Monty had written an autobiography in 1973 along with a co-author / ghostwriter, Bill Libby, who was predominantly a sports writer and sports biographer. And Monty had written this book and gotten it published at the time, and he had made it known at the time that he wasn't happy with it because he had turned in an 800-page manuscript to the publisher, and then the published book was about 300 pages. So the way Monty Hall put it was they released the Reader's Digest version of my life.
Right.
And the other thing that happened was Monty lived an incredibly long time. Monty lived another 46 years after he had written his autobiography. More years of adult life followed that autobiography than preceded it. Monty lived an incredibly long time and did a lot more stuff. And there were things that were significant in his life that hadn't even happened yet at the time the book was published. So in a way, it was kind of incomplete. Also, his son at one point, because I interviewed his children, I did new interviews with his children for this version of the book. One of the things that his son brought up was it captures my dad at a really specific point in his life. It's a point in Monty's life where he was looking to do stuff other than let's make a deal. And if you read this book, the original book from 1973, you come away with the impression that Monty kind of hates the show. That's not the image that he wanted to set out at all. It was very unintentional, and it was tied to the fact that Monty, at the time the book was published, had been doing it for 9 years and wanted to give acting a try and wanted to try other things.
Right.
So you get this vibe from the book that he's not happy with let's make a deal. And his children made it clear, and no, that's not it at all. Our dad loved the show. Our dad was proud of the show. So it was an incomplete picture of Monty Hall in the long run because he ended up living such a long time. And also it wasn't the most accurate depiction of Monty because it captured him at this really precise point in his life. Mm-hmm. So a new book was merited. What I found out very early on was the publisher didn't hold the copyright. The publisher, the rights to the book were held by Monty himself and his co-author, Bill Libby, mm-hmm. which meant that to do a book, all I needed to do was to secure permission from their heirs. Monty's children granted me permission, and then I was able to hunt down Bill Libby's children through social media and got their permission. So his children and both of their children are going to be getting some
coin off of this.
Some coin off of this. Yeah. Let me start that sentence over again.
Yeah,
as long
royalties,
as
I believe.
Royalties, yes.
So
wow,
Monty's children,
some shekels. Is that some clams?
Monty's children and Bill Libby's children will both be receiving some portion of the royalties from this book, in addition to me.
Yeah, I noticed that, you have third billing on this, which, I mean, you didn't have to. I thought that was admirable. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, well, I figured Monty Hall by Monty Hall would sell more copies than Monty Hall by Guy. So, but to be clear about what the book is, it is the full text of the original 1973 book, to which I've added new research and new interviews. I would say to any game show fans out there who happen to own Monty Hall's old biography, the book that I've just released is 60% new material. So
awesome.
You're getting your money's worth if you buy my book.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's his book plus all the stuff.
Plus a whole lot of new research, a whole lot of new interviews. I conducted.
I didn't know if you went in and did like a Peter Jackson director's cut.
Well, I was going to say, if I may, it's like the Lord of the Rings, and then you're coming in with the Silmarillion.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm here all night.
Yeah, this is the Silmarillion of Monty Hall books.
So I have a question I've been wanting to ask Adam all night. So Adam, you've written one or more books.
I mean, you've written like
this is number 10.
10. Yeah.
This is number 10 that just came out. Yeah.
Is that hard?
Good question, Mike.
People inquiring,
good question.
It's
that
incisive.
Where do you get your ideas?
Yeah, I mean,
yeah. There's some challenge to it. One of the difficulties is people that you want to talk to, but it's very difficult to track them down sometimes. Or there are some people that just aren't comfortable giving interviews, so they say no. And it has nothing to do with the subject of your book. It has nothing to do with anything about what you're doing. It's just they aren't comfortable giving interviews. They aren't comfortable talking, or they don't trust their own memories.
Yeah.
So that can be difficult sometimes. And sometimes it's a matter of the research material that's available. Game shows were not treated with the greatest amount of respect in the old days. It's been very nice to see kind of this generational change in television critics, where we now have TV critics who have their own opinions, and they love stuff and they hate stuff, as all generations of critics have. But you have TV critics now who are willing to say, wait a minute, I actually did like game shows. But game shows were this popular whipping boy for TV critics for years and years and years. So they weren't covered so much in depth at the time. So that limits the amount of research that you have to draw from. You kind of have to pick and choose things. It's funny having to pull up facts from critics who just hated the shows. Like this piece of information that I have about Let's Make Deal comes from somebody who just Well, I mean, I'll tell you my favorite newspaper column that I stumbled upon, and I don't remember the writer's name, but there was a newspaper columnist who wanted to write a column about how just game shows are so beneath her. And so she devoted an entire day to just watching game shows and taking notes on her thoughts on each one. And the gist of it is, these contestants are stupid, and these games are so puerile, and this is just so classless. I can't believe I'm watching these things. They're such garbage.
That is the stupidest thing I've ever heard.
The thing that gets me is the contestants are so dumb. How are they not getting the answer to this? I knew the answers to all these questions. I hate these game shows because the contestants are idiots. And one of the points that she makes is when she comes to her review of Hollywood Squares, she mentions that she didn't understand the game because a Jehovah's Witness knocked on the door at the start of the show, so she missed the first 2 minutes.
Well,
so this woman wrote a half a page about how game shows are beneath her because she's too smart for them. In the middle of telling us that she's too smart for game shows, she's telling us that 28 minutes wasn't enough time for her to figure out how Hollywood Squares.
I'm going to use the Jehovah's Witness defense.
There was I don't remember where it was, but there was a girl who live tweeted. She went to see the Avengers Endgame with her sister, and her sister had not seen any of the previous movies. And she kept saying, "Well, who is this guy, and why is he? Why does he turn invisible? And how come he's giving him back a shield? Why does he have a shield in his trunk?"
Here's the thing. That's
God.
That's why I can't get into superhero movies. I got an AMC pass. Now that my whole world is wide open, I can finally see whatever movies I feel like, even if it's something I wouldn't have seen before. So I decided to see some Marvel movies. And what I realized is all Marvel movies assume that you have seen all other Marvel movies.
Yeah, they're connected.
And it's
you've got to watch. You've got to watch them all.
And it's like I'm not going to do 20 movies worth of homework to see your movies.
Okay, well, Adam, it's been nice having you on the show.
Well, no, hold on. Well, I understand what Adam is saying, but there are people who's like, who has time to watch 20 movies? You know what? I watched like one in one weekend, and then the next weekend we watched another one. And over the period, because we had seen 5 or 6 or 8 of them or whatever over the period of a year, we got caught up before Infinity War came out.
Well, I'm glad we brought up Marvel movies because I was going to use that to illustrate. I mean, my question was stupid.
Yes, it was,
but it wasn't. It wasn't entirely stupid because I do have a point behind that. Believe it or not. Yeah. Because I think it's important for people to have a creative outlet, and this is my creative outlet.
Mine
this
too.
is Darren's creative outlet, but we get to it up nightly or weekly. And then we start over again. It's like we get to sit back down and say, okay, this is going to be a good podcast. And then it is or it isn't. And then we just keep going like that. But when you're writing a book, I've got to imagine, and I don't know if it's different because you're doing basically nonfiction. You're writing about things that actually happen. So you're almost like, almost like a journalist, or you're documenting these things. Yeah. I've always wondered, do you hit a point where you're like halfway through or 3/4 of the way through, and you're like, my God, this is really good, but I still have 100 pages to go, and I'm going to screw it up. Like the Marvel, because I was thinking Marvel movies. What if they got up to the Infinity War movie, and everybody loves it, and the Marvel writing room, they're like, we're out of ideas. We don't know what the hell we're going to do.
Well, that's where Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness comes in.
Yeah.
It's kind of the opposite thing. It's kind of a fear of stopping because I'm worried that there's an article out there or a magazine, some sort of magazine story or some sort of interview that they did for a TV show that I've missed somehow, and it has key information. And as an example of this, the first game show host biography I wrote is Bill Cullen. And a friend of mine, Matt Ottinger, oversees a Bill Cullen website. We're constantly updating it because we've learned so much more stuff about him in the 10 years because we keep digging up all of these interviews that he gave, and we keep digging up TV projects that we didn't know about. We found 2 or 3 unsold pilots that he hosted after that book was published. A member of his family was like going through the attic, and they found the unedited tape of a pre-recorded interview that he did for Good Morning America, which is just Bill teeing off on all things game shows for about 30 minutes, just off the top of his head. And so we just keep finding all this stuff, and it's like, damn, this would have been great for the book.
That's when you do another. You get enough stuff, you do another book.
Yeah.
Do a second edition.
What you do, Adam, is you release a 10th anniversary edition now with more chapters, and you sell the same twice.
Don't think that hasn't crossed my mind. The other thing that's come up is I've been doing some work for this museum in Rochester, the Strong Museum of Play and the National Archives of Game Show History. Plug. And and one of the things I came across that I didn't have access to before was a scrapbook of newspaper clippings, press clippings about Gene Rayburn.
Yeah.
That I didn't have before. And it was all stuff covering his early radio career, which is completely forgotten. But Gene Rayburn pretty much invented morning drive radio, what we think of. Basically, the John Boy and Billy format was created by Gene Rayburn.
Right.
That chapter of his career is largely forgotten, and I did my best to chronicle it at the time. But here were more newspaper articles and more magazine articles that went into great depth about it in the 1940s.
Yeah.
And I didn't have access to that at the time. So yeah, that's my big problem, is just being afraid to declare that a book is done because what am I missing? Maybe there's something else out there.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm sure that's one of the, some authors need to learn when to stop, because there's a couple of Stephen King books that, I was totally happy with how it ended. Oh, wait, there's another chapter, and then I hated the book. So there's that. there's that. Hey, Steve Farrell's on, and he wants to know if you're going to write a book about the Darren Cox story, because I was a game show host in college. My game show was Useless Knowledge. We had 7 episodes. That's enough for a book, right?
Yeah.
Hello.
1 chapter per episode, and then like an index. And
a graphic novel or something. Have you ever?
It's a picture book.
Have you ever thought about? Have you ever thought about writing one of these books and then inserting like a chapter or maybe just a few paragraphs of absolute to see if anybody catches it? To point out
like a copyright trap or something.
Yeah, just point out like and they were an extra on the Lone Ranger, and just see if anybody's ever going to research that. Or
Gene Rayburn had the largest collection of chewed bubblegum in the world. It was like a box that was 7 foot wide, full of chewed bubblegum.
He was the original Boba Fett.
Yeah, he was. Yeah. A lot of people didn't know that.
A lot of people didn't know that.
A lot of people.
Yeah.
Now
Howdy, friends. Are you a southern boy looking for a place that sells all the stuff you need with prices that won't bust your budget and get you butt on down to JD's 24-hour drive-through pawn and gun auto parts pharmaceutical adult gift bait and tackle discount cigarette outlet? We got screen doors, tractor tires, vibrators, moon pies, RC cola, long johns, road maps, guitar strings, whole hog sausage, and an abundant array of unfinished furniture. We got police scanners, shot glasses, Budweiser, Red Man, barbecue grills, Trojan rubber, spark plugs, deer meat, and don't forget our Triple X porn movie warehouse. Rent 87 movies, 7 nights, only $7. Come by every Tuesday night for illegal bingo gambling in our air-conditioned back room, and if you get too drunk to drive, hell, I'll take you home. We don't do it for the money. We do it because, by God, we care. Come visit JD's 24-hour drive-through pawn and gun auto parts pharmaceutical adult gift bait and tackle discount cigarette outlet. Now in our new location down on 11E behind where old man Johnson's barn used to be next to Jill's Affordable Tattooing. Do it today.
JD's, what a southern boy needs.
Our guest is Adam Nedeff. Adam, I'm going to try and stump you here, and I'm going to ask you,
Okay.
were there more hosts for the Family Feud or people who played James Bond?
Okay, so let's see. Richard Dawson, Ray Combs,
Yeah.
Louis Anderson,
Yeah.
John O'Hurley,
Yeah.
Richard Karn, Steve Harvey,
Mm-hmm.
and then we have Sean Connery, Roger Moore, Timothy Dalton.
Okay.
I
I missed it. I was
I'm
back. I'm back. Welcome back.
Pierce Brosnan. Let's see. Does
You're forgetting George Lazenby.
George
Don't
Lazenby?
give
Yeah.
him the answer.
I'm trying to help him. Wait a minute. I am trying to stump him.
Daniel Craig.
I'm trying to help
Daniel
him out.
Craig, thank you for not missing Daniel Craig. And then who do you think is
Yeah.
going to be the new one? Is it going to be Idris Elba? Is it going to be Henry
I think
Cavill?
they've already ruled
Cavill?
out Idris Elba.
Did they really? I thought it
believe
was still
so.
up between him and old Henrietta Cavill.
Henrietta Stone.
Yeah.
Yeah. We're getting off.
No, I think that I'm going to go for a dark horse candidate and say it's going to be Steve Carell.
Stupid. Yo, you don't even know what stupid is. It's about to get all stupid up in here.
People with like a Cockney accent through the whole movie, and you know.
Yeah.
So I think it's a tie. I think it's a tie.
I think it is a tie. Yeah.
You know what? I grew up watching
Now,
Richard Dawson.
do you know? Now, the more fascinating thing is the people who almost hosted Family Feud and then did. At one point, Joe Namath was being considered for the job.
What?
Yeah.
And at another point, Dolly Parton was being considered for the job.
Well, let me ask you this: Do you think that in any of the seminars that Richard Dawkins was doing, Richard Dawkins, that someone showed up with a Family Feud T-shirt and they were like, "Oh, I'm sorry, I'm completely messed up."
See, I would.
Yeah.
I
or vice versa.
I liked Richard Dawson. Okay, I grew up watching Richard Dawson, and I really liked Ray Combs. I did.
Yeah.
John O'Hurley is kind of forgettable, and so was what's his face, the dude from
George
Richard
Lazenby.
Karn.
Richard Karn. Thank you. Yeah, George Lazenby was he only hosted one
Yeah.
episode of Family Feud.
He did.
Yeah.
And then, but as much as I love Louis Anderson gave that vibe that he just really wanted to be anywhere else. He's like, survey said, top 5 questions, and oh God.
Yeah.
And he sounded like Krusty the Clown.
Name a body part that women are self-conscious about. You said butt. Survey said. What the hell is that?
And he was just like, what? Just like he's gonna die any minute. I've never seen anybody more miserable.
There was Howard Felcher was the executive producer for Goodson Topman on the original version of Family Feud, and he gave an opinion of Louis Anderson once. This isn't an exact quote, but it's close. But he said if Louis Anderson walked into a restaurant after taping 5 episodes of Family Feud, and one of the families was in the restaurant having dinner, he'd have no idea who they were.
Poor I mean, I love him. I loved him as a stand-up comic, but it just that was not a that was, and something.
I mean,
it's like, and you know what? I really like Steve Harvey, not Harvey.
Yeah.
But Family Feud used to be a family show, and it's not so much anymore.
We've all grown up.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. But I mean, have you noticed that they're trying to shift to an older
Yeah,
audience?
yeah, and the thing is
And I mean,
they've
it
gotten
works.
results to it. So
Yeah.
and I mean that's the tricky thing when you offer a criticism like that. The problem is, it works. So
It's
even
totally
if you
working.
don't like it, you kind of have to say,
Yeah.
you kind of have to step by and say, okay, well, it's working for them. It's getting results. So,
I mean, but what kids
really
are watching? What kids are watching game shows now anyway? They're watching YouTube videos of people getting kicked in the nuts by a mule.
No, you're
My niece. The exciting news from back home is my niece has grown obsessed with the original Bob Barker years of The Price is Right.
Oh,
okay.
There's Pluto TV, which I think we were talking about before we started recording this.
Pluto,
Yeah. They have a 24-hour-a-day channel of nothing but The Price is Right, starring Bob Barker.
Yeah.
And it's episodes spanning 1982 to 1985. And apparently my niece just loves that channel and loves the original Price is Right. The interesting thing is there's still a kids audience among what I kind of call the legacy shows, which are shows like Wheel of Fortune and Jeopardy, which have just been on forever.
Yeah.
And the result of those shows being on forever is there are people who got hooked on those shows, watching them with their grandparents, watching them with their parents, and now they're watching them as adults, and now they're watching them with their kids, and their kids are getting hooked on them. So, yeah, I mean, there's definitely a kid audience out there. I just went to a live show of Wheel of Fortune. Wheel of Fortune has a live touring production now, just as The Price is Right does. And I sat in the audience for that. There were definitely kids in the audience for Wheel of Fortune when I went there last week. So, yeah, there's another generation of kids growing up on game shows. One of the things that I find fascinating, though, is one of the media that we're on right now, Twitch, has sort of created this environment where you can create your own. And there are people that are doing just their own game shows on Twitch. I have a very good friend named Stod St. Fleur who's created a game show called You Can't Be Serious. And he hosts it out of his bedroom, and he hosts it on Twitch and gets a very good audience for it. And the premise of the show, and it's a fantastic premise, but basically the premise of You Can't Be Serious is you're playing a game like Pyramid, and your partner is Alexa.
Okay.
So the idea is to feed Alexa things that'll cause Alexa to say the word that you're looking at.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Have you,
go ahead.
Have you ever played the You Don't Know Jack, the You Don't Know Jack games?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So,
I'm in charge of the games every Christmas party in my family. And yeah, we always end up doing Jackbox.
So one of the things that I want to do with the show, and maybe with patrons or guests or whoever, is stream that thing on Twitch and play with the audience or play with the guest. There's a couple of reasons for that. One is I think it'd be fun, and two is every time we try to do it as a family here, things get violent. I'm pretty sure that there's a deleted scene of The Shining where they were playing You Don't Know Jack right before he got the axe and started going through the hotel.
Well, we have there's a friend of the show, a friend of mine, friend of Mike's, Michael Flannery. And when he was at WCPO here in Cincinnati, he hosted a local game show called Know-It-Alls, which is all Cincinnati trivia. And he brought it back, and he hosts it on Facebook from his used Prius. And last week, he was giving away a chance to win $5,000. And what he was doing, he was giving away Ohio lottery tickets. So it's a chance to win $5,000. So, you mentioned Bob Barker just a minute ago, and that segued into actually what I had next on the list. Netflix had this documentary called The Contestant Who Knew Too Much, and it made me angry because you weren't part of it.
Hey, what happened?
It's about a game show, and I'm like, well, where in the hell is Adam? And I watched it. You weren't there. I rewound it, and I fast forward through it again, and I looked through the credits, and you're not on it, and it pissed me off.
The crazy thing was I was working at CBS in the prize department the day that happened.
Okay.
I was in my office, and we got word that the Price is Right taping that was happening across from us was being shut down for 45 minutes while an emergency investigation was being conducted.
Yeah.
And everyone was saying, cheater. We think this guy cheated. And meanwhile, me being a game show fan and me being a game show fan with internet access, I'm like, he probably just knew the prices, because there are devoted fans to game shows like there are any others.
Yeah.
And there are fans that know the prices on The Price is Right. It's like there was all this panic about it. And I'm just thinking, well, he probably just recognized all the prizes in the showcase.
Yeah.
And it wasn't that contestant. It was a guy in the audience who was helping him out.
Yeah,
ultimately that's what it turned out. It was just a guy who knew the prices.
They made this big big documentary about it.
Yeah.
And after I watched it, I'm like, so? No, there was no scandal. He just, he's just a guy who had a
got
good
blown
memory.
up into into far more than it should have and more than it would have in past years.
Yeah.
We were talking about the Pluto channel, and there's one of my favorite episodes that they've rerun from The Price is Right, and I'm not so obsessed that I can tell you the episode number and watch for it on Pluto.
Episode 114, 1987.
Yeah.
Yes. Holly was the
but
first.
there was
There's an extended edition where
the first item up for bids is a pair of lamps, and Bob's like, okay, contestant, what's your bid on this pair of lamps? And contestant goes, okay, the brand name on those lamps was Quoizel, right? And Bob says, yes, it was Quoizel. And she says, and there's two of them, right? And he's, yes. Okay, $416. And the bell sounds for the perfect bid, and Bob says, it's $416. Congratulations, you won the lamps. And she explains, I've memorized 400 of the prices on this show.
Yeah.
And immediately you can see Bob's attitude is Bob is kind of rooting for her to win the hour, because Bob is seeing it as, I have a loyal viewer here.
Oh, yeah.
And you can see the audience pulling for her, and she wins her pricing game, and her pricing game is Safecrackers, and she wins Safecrackers because it's another prize that she recognized. So The Price is Right, under Barker's watch, treated it as a reward, as an incentive. They made a point of saying, if you watch The Price is Right every day, you will win on The Price is Right.
Yeah.
Because we do cycle these prizes in and out.
Yeah.
Irritable Dad Syndrome is proud to be associated with Newsly, the all-in-one audio super app for iOS and Android. For the first time ever, the entire internet becomes listenable, all in one place. Newsly picks up articles about the most trending topics and reads them to you in a natural human voice. Irritable Dad Syndrome is available there too. So stop scrolling and start listening. Download Newsly now. Just go to www.newsly.me and use this promo code 1RR1TABLEDAD and receive a free 1-month premium subscription.
Which brings me to one of our listener questions. Jim Timmerman, who is a frequent contributor to the show, was asking what was the biggest game show scandal? And it was probably, it the $64,000?
In this country, it would be the $64,000 question scandal. The broader thing was it was the quiz show scandal, because there were so many rigged game shows in the 1950s. And what it boiled down to was basically it hadn't occurred to the government that you would rig a game show. So there was no law regulating them at the time. And all these scandals come out, and suddenly it hits the government, we should actually have a few laws regulating these. So yeah, there were a lot of unethical game shows doing a lot of stuff that was not okay and was very, very sketchy behind the scenes. And they cleaned house, in a matter of speaking, and the networks established these departments that would oversee game shows and come up with measures of keeping them ethical and keeping them honest. And that continues to this day. I mean, I can tell you about the processes on a lot of the game shows that I've worked on. Contestants, and I feel bad when this happens, you're asked by some game shows sometimes not to loudly trumpet what shows you're working on, because they like to keep it under wraps until the press release comes out that, hey, we're doing this show, and they don't want you to announce before the press releases come out, hey, I've been working on this show for the past 2 months. So sometimes you're asked to keep the game show that you're working on under wraps while you're working on a 12-week contract for it.
Right.
So I've worked on shows where we have had to send contestants home because it turns out they knew me, or they're friends of other people that work on the show. Another measure that game show use very often is randomization, which is we prepare too much material for the game, and then we use random drawings before the show starts to decide which one we'll use for each episode that we tape that day. So we'll come in knowing that we're going to tape 5 episodes, and we'll bring in 6 or 7 stacks of material. And we do a random drawing where we decide, okay, the material in this envelope is what we're going to use for game 1. The material in this envelope is what we're going to use for game 2. And that way you can't really give any of the contestants any help ahead of time, because that's out of everyone's hands. Nobody knew in advance what material was going to be used for their games.
I never thought about that. Yeah. Another listener question, Mr. Chris Hughes, who's stalking you on Facebook. Again, let us know if it becomes a problem.
We've got people.
He wants to know, what will the legacy be for Barker's Beauties?
The legacy for Barker's Beauties, it's kind of a strange thing, because they were considered just kind of part of the package at the time. There's stuff about The Price is Right that hasn't aged well. For example, reach into my pockets and find the $100 bill.
You can't do that anymore.
Yeah, you can't do that anymore.
Especially when you put it in your pants pocket.
Yeah. But what was interesting was every now and then Bob would just, it was one of the pricing games that didn't take a lot of time to play. Like there was a game called Most Expensive. That's a very, very fast game. And very often Bob would round up the models and just have a chat with them after playing Most Expensive to fill a little time and get a sense of some personality out of them. He would ask the question, what do you want for Christmas? What's going on in your life? And just a very broad question that would get some answers out of them and give them a little sign of life. And I do appreciate that about the old era of game shows. As much as there's some baked in sexism in a lot of old media, and definitely game shows were not immune to that, I do appreciate that Bob did that. He did give the models some kind of personality and give us a chance to know them. It's interesting how The Price is Right had a rotation of many, many models over the years. They came and went. But there are three that I think are probably the three that Chris is referring to as Barker's Beauties, which were Diane Parkinson, Holly Hallstrom, and Janice Pennington, who were like the varsity squad of the models because they were there for years and years and years.
Yeah, Holly was my favorite.
And they were as much of that show as Bob was.
Yeah. All I know is the microphone with the really long stem with the ball in there.
Yeah.
A Sony ECM51 telescoping model, for those of you who are shopping on eBay.
Was Bob Barker's microphone longer than Gene Rayburn's?
Oh.
And I'm talking about microphones.
Okay.
I'm talking about microphones. Yeah. I'm not this isn't a euphemism.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was the same microphone. Gene was using a feature of the microphone that Bob didn't use.
Okay.
That's the reason it's called a telescoping model, because you could pull it like a telescope and elongate it. And Gene liked to have it that way because it enabled more physical humor. He could wave it like a baton, or he could toss it like a javelin. He would do physical shtick with the microphone being really long.
Smack people in the head. Yeah.
Yeah.
He could smack
and Bob
Fanny
didn't really
Flagg
do that.
upside
Bob,
the face with it. Yeah.
Yeah. So Bob kept it short. Gene kept it long, but ultimately their microphones were the same length. And I have photos of them in the dressing room comparing to verify that.
Wow.
Okay. Was it in Diane's contract that she always brought the mic out to him? Did the other girls hate her because why does that bitch always get
the one that usually brought the microphone was Janice. Janice was somehow the one. Yeah, Janice was the one that was always on microphone duty.
Get your own.
Did he have a contract that just said I can't walk out with a microphone? It has to be brought to me.
And honestly, I don't think I've watched it once with Drew Carey, and I really like Drew Carey. But I mean, he appears to be good on the show. Does he have someone bring him a mic too, or? I know he kept the have your pet spayed or neutered.
I would think it would come down from the ceiling like the Let's Get Ready to Rumble guy.
Well, the interesting thing, Drew,
badass, wouldn't it?
Drew has a lav mic and a handheld mic now.
Okay.
Oddly enough, and I think some of the old traditions are still going. I do kind of like the microphone and the handoff, just because again, it's a chance to give you a chance to see the entire cast of the show, so to speak.
Yeah.
Drew starts the show by saying hi to the model, who hands him the microphone, and then he turns around and says hi to George Gray, the announcer, and the camera pans over to George. So you get to see the whole family before the show starts, and I do like that. I like that they've changed it and expanded it a little bit to include the announcer that way.
Steve Farrell has a two-part question. He wants to know, Dear Adam, if you could bring back a canceled game show, what would it be, and what popular game show do you simply not get? Like, is there one that you're like, why does anybody watch this crap?
A canceled game show that I would love to bring back. On a personal level, I wish Nickelodeon would bring back Double Dare, because I worked on that show for 2 seasons and had the time of my life working on that show.
Yeah.
Just absolutely adored it. And then if I can give two answers here, there's a show that I think would be a perpetual choice to bring back, because it would always have a space to fill on the television landscape. Where in the world is Carmen Sandiego?
Where is she?
Anything that makes learning fun. Yeah, it was a lot of fun. It was a good memory of my childhood watching that show. But just the most fantastic use of guest stars and music and sketch comedy to present questions in a way that was more engaging than just asking a trivia question, and instilling a little geographic knowledge into the contestants. And it was a showcase for smart kids. That's the other thing. You have all these kids that, you don't get the reward for, if you're not cut out for basketball or football in school. Here's a game show where you can win a trip to Orlando or wherever else you want for knowing geography and for excelling in geography.
Yeah.
And just any outlet like that is worth something. So those would be my two picks. As far as game shows that you don't, I'm very cautious about answering a question like that, and I'll tell you why. And it has nothing to do personally. A friend of mine was quoting Dan Enright. He's a guy named Mark Maxwell Smith who worked on a lot of game shows, and he quoted Dan Enright, who from Jack Barry and Dan Enright Productions, the people who did Wheel of Fortune and Tic Tac Doe. Dan Enright gathered his staff around one day to watch television with him. And the point of this exercise was Dan was giving them notes on the game show that they were watching, which was not one of their game shows. But he was breaking down point by point why this is a bad show and why it's just awful and how it's not going to last 13 weeks because they're making this mistake, it's being presented this way, and that's wrong. It should be presented this other way. And so he was just rattling off all the things the show was doing wrong. Well, the show was Wheel of Fortune. He was giving his staff this lecture on how bad Wheel of Fortune is. And it was like 5 months into the run of Wheel of Fortune.
Yeah, right.
And what Mark said was all that accomplished was the longer Dan Enright lived, the longer Wheel of Fortune stayed on the air, the dumber he looked for making us listen to that lecture on why Wheel of Fortune was bad.
Yeah.
So I stay away from that stuff because it reminds me, there is an audience for stuff, and maybe even if you don't see it, some other viewer sees something in it that you're not getting out of it.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm always very cautious with criticism because, maybe there's something that I'm not seeing.
One of the movie producers had sent a heartfelt letter to Steven Spielberg on how he just can't agree with them calling the movie Back to the Future and that this was wrong and this was wrong and that he just really believes that there's so many things that they should not put in the movie and the way it was going was not and guy was clearly out of his mind. And then if you look, there's a TV critic who just gave the Beatles, and Mike, I know you hate the Beatles, but he gave their appearance on the Ed Sullivan Show, just gave them the worst review. Their music is horrible, and their performance, and this and that, and he doesn't see them amounting to much in the future.
Well, yeah, and one of the right when Bruce Springsteen began to take off in the 1970s, he was on the cover of Time magazine, and one of the letters to the editor that Time got after publishing that issue is, why are we putting this guy on the cover when we're not going to remember who he is 6 months ago?
Oh, yeah. There you go.
So again, that's one of the tricky things about criticism is you don't know what's going to happen next. You don't know where somebody's career is going to take them. You don't know how a TV show is going to evolve. You don't know the next step in the story here.
Well, it's been 50 minutes since we talked about U2. I'll bring them up again.
Yeah.
When we went to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, they had their rejection letters in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, which was awesome to see.
Was it RCA Records that turned them down?
Yeah, I don't remember, but there were a few of them up there.
Yeah.
I have what some may consider a stupid question. It's more of a statement, I guess.
Okay.
So was it Chuck Barris? Is that the guy, the Gong Show
Host
guy?
of the Gong Show.
Okay, so I remember there being this conspiracy thing, and I watched a documentary on it that he killed people.
Yes.
He's a hitman. He was a spy. The documentary. Well, hold on.
Okay.
So this does have a point.
Okay.
So the documentary just was going through all this stuff about it, and it was a big secret, and they would have interviews with people that were like, yeah, he's totally a spy, and this is awesome, and then interviews with people being like, that's crazy, you're out of your mind, and they were really invested in it. And then every once in a while you would see something on social media like, he did these awesome things, and no, he didn't, and blah, blah, blah. And years later, Christopher Lee, Lord of the Rings, Saruman.
Yes.
It comes out that he was like basically what James Bond was based on, or one of the ideas was that James Bond was based on him. He was an assassin. He did all these amazing things. Everybody's like, yeah, he did that.
Right.
Yeah, he totally did that. I'm like, why are you so impressed or freaked out by Chuck Barris? But when it comes to Saruman, you're like, yeah, he totally murdered people and like flew in helicopters hanging on by his teeth. It's what he did. He's Saruman.
I think it's because you can see Christopher Lee doing that.
But you can picture that a lot more easily than you can picture Chuck Barris.
Well, because
icing
Chuck Barris,
it's just true.
I like to imagine that Chuck wore like his frilly tuxedo shirt.
Oh,
the big floppy hat when he killed people.
But, well, you want to get on their
stuff. And Gene the dancing machine.
Yeah, you want to look like you're not a threat.
Chuck Barris came and said. He told everybody that he did. It was true. It was absolutely true.
Yeah.
And then, 10 years later, I don't know what you're talking about. So,
yeah.
I mean, no one knows. I bet Adam knows. Adam knows everything.
I have a book forthcoming. Actually, the next book that I have coming out is The History of the Gong Show.
Okay.
And I had the chance to talk to Chuck's staff, all of whom were just completely amused by that book when it first came out. They saw their boss confessing to being a CIA hitman. And they said, if you were an employee of the company, if you were one of this man's employees, there was one detail in his story that completely tipped it, that this was Bowl, because the idea was he created the dating game as a cover because you would travel with the couple as a chaperone to wherever they want a trip to. And that was where he was carrying out the murders. I was chaperoning these people, and then
like Tony
so that was
Soprano,
part of Chuck's story.
Like taking Meadow to college, and I'm going to ice this guy over here. And then...
Exactly, yeah, that was basically Chuck's story. And what Chuck staffers all said was Chuck never ever chaperoned the dates because he was the boss of the production company. He had other stuff to do. And basically, the chaperone for the dates on the dating game was the duty that was always assigned to the newest employee, because that was how they gauged whether or not you knew what you were doing. Because it was a completely do-nothing assignment where a bad thing could possibly happen. So you basically need to keep one eye open and keep one eye on it.
Yeah.
So basically, it was the newest hire at the company who had the job of chaperoning the dates on the dating game. And it was just your test to make sure that that you weren't going to eat crayons at your desk or anything.
The red
so no,
one
it wasn't
is
Chuck.
delicious.
But the other thing that I appreciate was a couple of his staffers told me, but because his staffers loved him, just across the board, nobody who worked for Chuck had a bad word to say about him. They all loved having him as a boss. And what a couple of his staffers told me was, we all knew this was crap, but just because we loved the guy so much, we would keep the lie going for him. If somebody walked up to one of Chuck Barris' staffers and said, "Hey, I read that book about Chuck Barris being a murderer. You work for the guy. Is that true?" And he says, "Yeah, that's not true. That can't possibly be true." Chuck, the only weird thing about Chuck was he would always disappear on Thursday to fly to Europe. Wait, what? Yeah. Chuck would always disappear on Thursdays to fly to Europe, and that was. Well, wait a minute. What part of Europe? And he said, "Well, I remember there was one time it was a small town in Sweden." It's like, Chuck, why are you going to a small town in Sweden? But that was the only real quirk he had. Oh, also he had this really weird gun in the top drawer of his desk, and I don't know why he had this weird gun, but I had never seen one like. Oh my God! And so
2 and 2 together.
Yeah.
Well, listen, and Adam, don't let me tell you how to do your job. But when you write the book about the history of the Gong Show, please tell me that you're not going to include the Dave Attell reboot of it. Please.
I imagine that
I am a Dave Attell fan. I think I've seen every episode of Insomniac with Dave Attell. I've met Dave Attell. I have Dave Attell's autograph. He is hilarious, one of the greatest stand-up comics at all. But he, on the 1 to 10 scale of not giving a about doing a show, he passed up Louis Anderson. But he was like in the 30s. I mean, he could not care less about hosting the new Gong Show. It was really bad, because I was psyched out of my mind when I heard they were redoing it with Dave Attell, and I watched. I'm like, God.
Well, the thing that you kind of start to realize is they've attempted to bring the Gong Show back a few times. They've a DJ named Don Blue hosted it for a year in the 1980s, and then they did it on Game Show Network with George Gray hosting it. And as you watch these revivals, what you come to realize is the secret ingredient to the Gong Show was Chuck Barris.
Yeah.
Like, he was so much of the flavor and the identity that even if you have people who really care about what they're doing and really want to do it right, and from what I can glean, the most recent revival of it on ABC fits that. It was made by people who really did care about the show and really wanted to do a good/great revival of the Gong Show.
Mm-hmm.
But the problem is, if you don't have Chuck, and unfortunately the passage of linear time means we will never have Chuck again.
Right.
You don't have the Gong Show, because he was so much of that show's identity, and he was so woven into his own creation that you can't really do it and have it be the same if he's not there.
And I look forward to every single appearance by Gene the Dancing Machine. I don't know why. I just ate that up. I absolutely just loved it.
And now it's time for Dave's Comedy Corner. I wonder what Adam and Eve thought the first time the leaves changed color. It's like,
Hey, what happened?
what the hell's wrong with all these trees? What did we do this time? Thank you very much. I'll be here all week. This has been Dave's Comedy Corner.
Waka waka waka.
This episode is going to drop on the 22nd, just a few days before Thanksgiving. And no spoilers, but I noticed on your Facebook page that you went to the re-release in theaters of the greatest Thanksgiving movie ever, Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. I just want, don't spoil it, but how great was, because you said it was like 15 minutes of deleted scenes were in the theatrical release.
Oh.
How cool was it seeing new stuff?
I've never seen a guy get picked up by his testicles before.
Here's the thing. It was really cool. And here's the thing. It's not 15 minutes of deleted scenes. It's a 15-minute deleted scene.
Oh.
There is one incredibly long scene that got whittled down in the final cut. But it's when Steve Martin first boards the plane and ends up sitting next to Dell. And it's great and it's funny. And I get the impression that it's partly improvised by John Candy. But it's Dell just telling the entire story of his career as a shower curtain ring salesman.
Oh my God!
And it goes on forever, and you see Steve Martin just growing more and more aggravated, and the story goes and goes and goes, and there's no point to it. And as you're watching it, I can absolutely understand why this got deleted. I can see why they cut this out, but it adds a lot more depth to the scene later where Steve Martin just finally loses it
in the hotel.
You're like a chatty
just lets him have it.
Because that's always
pull your own string.
That scene's always bothered me a bit because it makes him look like he's just a cruel person. But
here's an idea. Have a point. You know?
Yeah, in fact, if you do some Googling around, you can find the original shooting script for Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. The original, as I understand it, the original cut was 3 hours long.
I thought it was over. I thought it was like 3:30 or
it was a massive movie, and so the original screenplay is now out there, so you can read the screenplay, and it's recommended reading because it's a very entertaining script just in general. It's a fun read.
Yeah.
But also it adds a lot more clarity. Like my roommate and I were talking about how the final scene didn't make sense to us for years and years and years, because we didn't understand why Steve Martin's wife would be crying when she sees John Candy walk in for Thanksgiving dinner.
Right.
And when you read the screenplay, oh my God, it turns out that the wife is a much bigger character in the original screenplay.
Yeah.
And you learn a lot more of her story, and you come to understand why she gets so emotional at seeing John Candy for the first time.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's absolutely worth Googling and seeking this out. It's a great read, and it's, like I said, it lends a lot more depth and a lot more dimension to the movie that you watch every year at Thanksgiving.
Yeah. I was going to ask this question, and Mike, you can jump in and answer this too. But when I was in high school and this movie came out, a friend of mine, he went to see it over the weekend.
Okay.
And he was telling me Monday that it was great, and this is great, and this is great. And spoiler alert, he's like, yeah, and John Candy doesn't have a family and something else. I'm like, what? Shut up. Yeah. So he totally spoiled the movie for me. And has anyone, Adam, has anyone ever like totally spoiled something for you like that? I mean, it was still a great movie, but I'm watching the whole thing knowing that this is why this poor son of a bitch is acting this way.
Yeah.
And I just knew. Yeah. I just inherently knew. And
there's been a trend in the last couple of years of primetime game shows where the network promos give you a heads up that a lot of money is going to be won on the upcoming episode. And I don't care for that. Deal or No Deal gave away $1 million win in a promo once. And a few other shows have done that. It's like, no, it's...
Why would you do that?
Yeah.
Yeah, I've noticed that Rings of Power partially got spoiled for me. Mm-hmm. Just a little ad on Facebook. So I'm innocently scrolling on Facebook, and all of a sudden there's a picture of a character and it said, identity finally revealed. I'm like, oh, okay. Yeah. I know, without spoiling Rings of Power too much,
right?
You know that one or two characters are going to be revealed at the end. You just don't know who they are. You know who they are, but you don't know which characters it is. And it was a picture of one of the characters. Like, well, now I know that this character is one of those two characters.
Right. Yeah, if you don't watch The Walking Dead, you can't go on. If you miss an episode of Walking Dead, you can't go on Twitter the next day because Glenn will be trending. I'm like, oh, what happened?
Well,
to Glenn?
That's the other thing. You guys are in the Eastern time zone, so you don't suffer with this. But on the Pacific time zone, everybody who lives in this time zone just knows you have to stay off social media for about 3 or 4 hours before the broadcasting of anything that you want to see.
Right.
Because your friends on the East Coast may mean well, but it's, the first time that the new version of Pyramid with Michael Strahan, the first time they had a $100,000 win, I had it spoiled for me.
Yeah.
So, it's... People don't mean harm, but when you live on the Pacific time zone, you do have to train yourself to stay away from social media on the day of a thing that you care about.
Yeah. So. One more thing about Thanksgiving that I wanted to mention, and Mike's not a fan of this, but Adam, you seem to be a fan of all all media. Where do you stand on Alice's Restaurant being a Thanksgiving classic?
I really do enjoy it. The movie I didn't love so much.
The movie
but the song.
movie?
Yeah.
Don't
The
watch.
song
don't
is
watch.
almost as long as a movie.
The song is only 18 minutes long.
No, they adapted it into a movie with Officer Roby playing himself, which is kind of interesting. They actually they got the real police officer who made the arrest to play himself. And Officer Roby said afterwards, I figured if they were going to make a movie that pointed and laughed at me, I might as well be in the movie and make money from it. So yeah, this whole story of Arlo being arrested for littering, they actually tracked down the cop who did it and had him play himself. But other than that, the movie's not so great. I kind of thought it was sloppily edited a few times, and it's kind of distracting the way that's edited.
I thought it was very boring. I thought,
and a very slow pace.
I wouldn't have guessed that.
Yeah,
I wouldn't have guessed that would
I'm
be
telling
boring.
you. Well, Adam, Mike gave the song about 4 minutes, and he said I couldn't do it anymore. And it's, in my opinion, honestly, one of the greatest comedy pieces. It's fantastic storytelling. I mean, it's really storytelling at its finest.
And very picturesque and very, you get more of a story and more engagement out of the song than you do out of the movie.
Yeah.
He paints some really good pictures in the lyrics.
So at the risk of sounding like a...
Right.
And I know that you tolerate me going through a lot of stuff that you just don't care about. But to me, it was okay, now that's going for 18 minutes.
Right.
And then he sounds like Norm Macdonald to me. He's like, I'm going down to Alice's Restaurant. It's a restaurant, and the lady that works there, his name's Alice, and she owns it, and that's why they call it Alice's Restaurant, but that's not its name.
That's not the name of the restaurant. That's just the name of the song. That's why I called the song.
And I'm like, okay, all right, I get that. I get that. Okay, you got my attention. And there's a trash, and then there's two trashes.
You cut out before it got really, really good.
I read the lyric. I read ahead on the lyrics, and I was like, I get it. I get it.
Yeah.
Now I get. Now here I understand. At some point, when I'm in the old folks' home, somebody's going to be visiting, and they're going to say, okay, yeah, they needed to get the ring to Mount Doom, whatever.
Yeah.
And I'm going to jump up out of my wheelchair and beat them to death with a cane.
Yeah.
And I'll happily go to prison over it. I get it.
You'll be in an old folks home.
I'll be in an old folks home already. They'll just lock the door now, and I can't wheel around and steal other people's pudding. The point is that I very much appreciate the fact that you don't trash the things that I love. You've shown a significant amount of restraint.
Yes,
and I've noticed it. Yeah. You've showed
Our next episode is going to be all about Pussifer.
You've shown an amazing amount of restraint with John Wick 4.
I have.
Because you know that there lie demons if we fight about that.
Yes.
So
and you couldn't give this song you couldn't give it more than 4 minutes.
I really
thank you, Mike.
I tried.
And now we're fighting in front of our guest.
So when we over Thanksgiving, I will try it again.
Okay.
I'll try it again. But at the 3.5 minute mark, I couldn't help it. I was sitting in the office because I had it playing low volume, and it almost got me in trouble because I'm just sitting there and I'm listening to it, and I'm just like, damn it. Yeah. And it just came out, and nobody happened to be walking by my office.
Well,
I need to be in the right mood.
Yeah. Let me explain. Most of the things I appreciate come from my mother. Okay. My mom had an amazing, well, still has, an incredible selection of music that she enjoyed, and what she listened to, we loved. When I was a kid, I was going through her albums, and I found 4 or 5 albums by the Smothers Brothers. Holy hysterical.
Yeah.
And she would let us stay up and watch Carson. So it's like, and then I started watching Letterman and all that, whatever. So she comes home one day and she has Arlo Guthrie Greatest Hits, and we listened to this, and she and I and my brother Greg had tears in our eyes listening to this. And I listened to that song so many times that by like 7th grade, I had it memorized. I could do it top to bottom, So I'm not going to tear into it. And I listen to it every year at Thanksgiving.
And I respect that.
Yeah.
Growing up, I don't know if you heard of Tom T. Hall. Do you know Tom T. Hall?
Tom T.
We
Hall
had 8 tracks of Tom T. Hall.
Yeah.
And I was playing it for the kids because I listened to it like crazy when I was a little kid. And they're like, what is, he's talking about a chicken? Is this about a chicken? And I'm like, yeah, it's about a chicken. Can we listen to something else? We'll listen to something else. So I get it.
Yeah.
I get it.
Cool.
Now, let me ask you: does either one of you make a Thanksgiving tradition out of the Star Wars Holiday Special?
No. I've seen a lot of it on the YouTubes. It's hard to watch. The Art
It is hard to watch, and that's the thing. I watch it every year. I watch it every year, but the only thing that makes it fun is you have to watch it with somebody who's never seen it before.
I watched it.
If you're just watching it by yourself, it's insufferable. But you have to watch it with somebody who's never seen it before, just for the pleasure of the reactions.
I watched it as a kid in the proper age demographic for it when it was popular, and I had a hard time getting through it then.
Oh, I remember. I remember as a kid, like, there's something not right with this.
So one Christmas tradition that's kind of developed over the past couple of years here is that we will go through the entire Rocky series, like all the Rocky, including Creed.
Right.
So we'll go through all of them, and it's just it just started. Like, I watched the first one, and then like a kid would come down and watch part of it, and then go back up, and then I go to Rocky 2, and we get to like Rocky 3, and Bess would come down to see if I was alive. Really, you're going through all the Rockies? And then there was questions: are you actually going to do Rocky 5? We did Rocky 5 last year. Probably won't do that again.
Yeah, that's
and then it gets to Creed, and then the kids are like, "Whoa, this is!" And then they have the whole Rocky mythos down. We get to Creed 2, and it's like, "Oh, that's the Russian guy that killed the other guy. Killed who? Killed his dad. Whose dad? His dad." And you're getting this whole Rocky thing. So that's kind of happening, and I'm excited about it this year.
One of the things that weird Christmas traditions I used to do that I'm going to start again with my family, with my kids, is they're old enough to watch Better Off Dead. Okay, and that movie happens at or around Christmas time, so they need to see that. And also, we never read "'Twas the Night Before Christmas," but we do listen to David Sedaris read his story of 6 to 8 Black Men, which is the perfect Christmas story. Absolute perfect Christmas story. You have no idea, and you will listen to it because it's longer than 4 minutes.
I will listen to it. It's not the length of the song; it's the repetitiveness of it. But I'll listen. I will give it an honest shot.
Okay. Yeah. We're running out of time, but I want to ask Adam one more thing. Adam, do you got one more question in you?
Yeah, I got one more question.
A while back, I can't remember how long ago it was, but you met Weird Al.
I was an usher at the Pantages Theater. Weird Al was doing a concert there, and I had a great boss who allowed me to go off the clock early, because Weird Al's fans do not make a lot of trouble, so they figured they could go without one usher towards the end.
Right.
And I asked if I could wait in the autograph line. So I waited in the autograph line. Al came out there, and again, game show fan, game show historian, game show author, which means I have quite a collection of stuff. I said something to him that was completely true, and it made him laugh. I opened up this photo album, and I handed him a photo, and I said, "Could you autograph this photo for my Art Fleming photo album?" And he chuckles at first, and then he looks down at my arm, and he realizes I'm not joking. I have an Art Fleming photo album. And he just looks at me, and he shakes his head, and he says, "Everybody should have one. Everybody sign the autograph." So,
what else do you have besides the Art Fleming photo? What weird goes on in it do you have in that house of yours? We don't have time to get into this, but you have like hundreds of board games too, right?
I have about 250 board games in the living room. I have assorted press kits and books, and just a small number of props, question cards from old game shows. And then a friend of mine gifted me something which I didn't even realize they made. This friend gave me a gift, and it made my jaw hang because I had no idea this was a thing. The official Newlywed Game whoopee cushion. Honest to God.
Nice.
Well, yeah.
It was a Newlywed Game branded whoopee cushion.
Okay.
And so, yes.
Of all the stuff that you have, like, let's say you fall on hard times and, oh God, I've got to go sell my autographed Art Fleming photo. What do you have that would bring you out of a tight spot? What's the most unique, expensive thing that you valuable piece of merchandise that you have?
Well, the most valuable thing, I think, the thing that isn't really a game show thing, I commissioned somebody last year because I had a birthday coming up, and I try to give myself a present every year.
Happy birthday.
But I commissioned, thank you.
You're welcome.
I commissioned a few people in upstate New York to make me a Wheel of Fortune for the living room. So I have in my living room it's about the size of a coffee table.
Wow.
And it is a Wheel of Fortune, and it has interchangeable wedges like the Wheel of Fortune that we see on TV. And so now when I have people over here for game nights, I actually award prizes, and we actually play Wheel of Fortune on my living room wheel.
Is Bankrupt on there? Lose a Turn?
Yep. It is accurate to the 1986 wheel featured in the deluxe model from Pressman home game. And it also includes interchangeable wheels so that you can do either the daytime or the nighttime version configurations.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah.
You don't want to wrong with that. What do
you gotta be able to do that.
What do you charge for a vowel?
$250, as it has been since day one in 1975. The price of a vowel has never gone up on Wheel of Fortune.
You'd think with inflation as it is, a vowel
with
would
inflation,
cost $800.
inflation all around us, with the rise in the cost of living, as much as the economy has changed, a vowel has always cost Wheel of Fortune. There is no issue with scarcity that has affected the prices.
Oh man.
Yeah.
Well, Adam, we're way over, and we're gonna have you back. If you'll come back.
Absolutely.
This was even more fun this time around.
Yeah.
Before we go, remind people where they can go, because like I said, Black Friday is coming up. I know it's Bear Manor Media, correct?
BearManorMedia.com is the website for my publisher. Also, if you have some Amazon gift cards or stuff that you want to use up on Amazon, my books are for sale on Amazon just by doing a search for my name. First name, 80am. Last name, Nedeff. And I implore you, if you can buy from Amazon, please do, because they posted a $1 trillion loss this year. They're the first company in history to lose $1 trillion.
Wow.
And they need a boost.
Wow.
They need, I mean, it's tough times for Jeff Bezos right now. So whatever help you can give that guy, please do, and go to Amazon and buy it.
Okay. I'm telling everybody right now, I have the Gene Rayburn book. It's good. It's really good. Adam does his research.
Okay.
And granted, it's are you ever going to write a novel? Are you ever going to write something fiction?
I don't know. I mean, I've written fiction just for pleasure. I started doing it when I was out of college for about the first year. I wrote novels in my spare time, just as kind of a creative outlet. And I dug them out one night a few months ago, and I was like, wow, these are not that great. But I may revisit that someday.
Yeah. Well, if you do, we'll have you back. And you can promote those. So you can come back anytime you want. We love having you.
Oh, good.
Thank you so much.
Good.
So everybody, please go and check it out and buy some books off of Adam. You won't regret it. And on Black Friday, we encourage you to go to irritabledadsyndrome.com, go to shop. And then you can buy Irritable Dad Syndrome merchandise for your wife, your husband, your brother, anybody.
We've got a towel. We've got a towel with a wiener on it.
Yeah, it's a Whoppers all beef foot long hot dogs. Yeah. Perfect gift. So you can go to Patreon and you can donate $1 a month, and you can help us keep this fun. Or $2,000 a month.
It doesn't
double it. $4,000 a month. You can do that, and you will help us keep this podcast alive. So, Adam, thank you once again. And thank you, everybody else. And we hope everybody has a happy Thanksgiving. And we'll see you again on Irritable Dad Syndrome.
Before we go, my ventriloquist pal Peppy would like to say something. Hi, everybody. I hope you have a happy Thanksgiving. I personally prefer dark meat. Oh, yeah, give me some of that sweet dark meat. Bow, chicka, wow, wow. Okay, Peppy, that's enough. We'll see you next week.
Bow, chicka, wow, wow.
This one could be interesting because we're only on Twitch.
It could be interesting.
Yeah.
I'm feeling like a lot of that is on me, though.
I'm putting on here that you're an author. I know you actually are an author, but
yes.
Well, yes, he's. Did you not
It
listen?
is technically true.
Did you not listen to the last episode?
I'm probably going to say something very off key and off color and make everything awkward for a while. So
that's
that I can
every episode.
bow out.
Yeah.
Name an ailment that school nurses see every day. You said tummy ache. Survey said.
I know that I'm in the hands of highly trained professionals.
Sorry.
You were a great guest last time, so unless something changed with your medication.
A person in our audience loved you.
Yes.
Good. Awesome.